Welcome back, revolutionary thinking, and I'd like to say thank you right now for the comments that you gave me on my last video. I really appreciate it. Colin, thanks. He wrote a lot. Arts Paradiso, I like that. Logical Redneck, thank you, sir. And, looks like I'm getting some traction. And today, what I want to do, this debate is like 4 hours and 58 minutes, but I want to be Andrew Yang's anger translator for the part of the debate that, I didn't comment on. So, here we go.
This is an ABC News Live special. The stage is set, and
you know what I really don't like? I really don't like how they're trying to get something important as our democracy and make it into a gladiator battle.
After Iowa, the stakes couldn't be higher.
We don't settle. We don't back.
Look, just the music in the background. No, 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 no.
Down.
We choose hope.
We choose this. We don't settle. But hang on a second. Like, what are your policies? Like, once you get in that White House, what's actually going to be passed, and how is the country going to change? I don't need your sound bites. I don't need your background music that riles people up. I need the data. I need the facts. I need the logic.
We are here and we are strong.
I am the person who can fight him on the economy.
Okay, we're here and we're strong. Like, what does that mean? How are we strong? Why are we here?
And beat him.
In the fight to be the front runner, who will make a mark in New
It's a fight, so why don't we just get out a mace and, one of those clubs and just hit each other,
Hampshire tonight?
This is our best and maybe our last shot.
We have to evolve
Your last shot at copying people, maybe.
in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value.
Now that makes sense.
Change is coming.
You and your finger wagging.
Candidates, welcome. Vice President Biden, the first question is for you.
Okay, so the first question is for Vice President Biden.
In the last few days, you've been saying that Democrats will be taking too big a risk if they nominate Senator Sanders or Mayor Buttigieg. But they came out on top in Iowa.
Okay, but what about Andrew Yang? I think the safest bet is Andrew Yang and not you.
What risk did the Iowa Democrats miss?
Oh, they didn't miss anything. This is a long race. I took a hit in Iowa, and I'll probably take a hit here. Traditionally, Bernie won by 20 points last time, and usually it's the neighboring senators that do well. But I'm no matter what, I'm still in this for the same reason. We have to restore the soul of this.
Look, if he thinks he can take a hit in Iowa, and he can take a hit in New Hampshire, then I'm pretty sure it's going to be fine for Yang, because we have the rest of the states to go. And if Biden is going to stay in without doing well in those two first states, then Yang can sure as hell stay in, because he's got the most potential for growth.
Country, bring back the middle class, and make sure we bring people together.
And how? What's the plan?
So it's a simple proposition. It doesn't matter whether it's this one or the next. I've always viewed the first four encounters, 2 primaries and 2 caucuses, as the starting point. And so...
usually I'd be berating and attacking him, but actually, let's not do that. I'm not going to do that this time. This time I'm going to say to my fellow Yang gang that why are we getting so down on ourselves, even if Andrew doesn't have a big showing in Iowa and New Hampshire? I'm sure he'll have a better showing in New Hampshire, but this is just getting started. This is far from finished. And if Biden thinks he can grow from here on out when he has a ton of name recognition, we shouldn't be that worried about Yang.
That's how I do it.
But why are Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg too big a risk for Democrats?
Well,
Because Buttigieg is a copycat and Sanders doesn't have any plans? There, I answered it.
Well, you know that with regard to Senator Sanders, the president wants very much to stick a label on every candidate. We're going to not only have to win this time, we have to bring along the United States Senate. And Bernie's labeled himself, not me, a Democratic socialist. I think that's the label that the president's going to lay on everyone running with Bernie if he's a nominee. And
well, Yang is capitalism that doesn't start at zero. So I think that has a much better ring to it, especially because of the country we live in.
Mayor Buttigieg is a great guy and a real patriot.
I beg to differ.
He's a mayor of a small city
who fired like a black police chief, let all these homeless people lose all of their stuff, and did a whole bunch of other shady, crazy stuff. And the worst thing is that a lot of these people, they have one face in front of the cameras and a whole nother face behind the cameras.
Some good things, but has not demonstrated he has the ability to, and we'll soon find out.
Why is he double?
To get a broad scope of support across the spectrum.
Just what we need. 2 copies of Buttigieg. Repeating everything.
Including African Americans and Latinos.
Senator Sanders, let me give you the chance to respond first. President Trump certainly thinks this label socialism will work. At the State of the Union, he said socialism destroys nations. He's never going to let socialism destroy American health care. And before the Super Bowl, he joked with Sean Hannity about your honeymoon in Moscow. Those hits are going to keep coming.
But what about Moscow Mitch?
If you're the nominee, why shouldn't Democrats be worried?
Because Donald Trump lies all the time.
And so do a lot of Democrats, though. So let's not get on our high horse.
Doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. It's a sad state of affairs. It really is. People say terrible things about Joe. He has ugly, disgusting things about Elizabeth, about Amy, about any.
But he's never said anything about Yang. He's never said a word about Yang. Because he knows he can't beat Yang. This is what's so hilarious about all of this. It's like we're ignoring the Asian elephant in the room. But this one's a good elephant. This isn't an elephant that breaks things. This is an elephant that can fix things. This is like a magic good elephant that we're ignoring. And he's right there in the room and he can fix everything and he's just being ignored. Actually, Trump has said things about Yang at one other debate that people don't trust the media. And he also said something about Yang during this debate, and they were both positive things. Donald Trump has never said one negative thing about Andrew Yang. And you know why that is? Because he is hoping that one of you other dumbasses gets the nomination so he doesn't have to go head to head with Yang in the general. That is the Trump administration's worst nightmare. But they're all counting on you to be the dummies that you are and lose. It's just so sad. It's just so sad. Oh my God. You know, why has Trump not said anything negative about Yang yet? Why? Tell me.
Anybody else who is up here. But I think, George, that at the end of the day, the way we defeat Donald Trump, and everybody
is by nominating Andrew Yang.
Up here, by the way, is united. No matter who wins this damn thing, we're all going to stand together to defeat Donald Trump.
Well, no, not really. If I don't get that, I'm gonna be honest with all of you guys. Like when Trump got in and Obama got out, like my life really didn't change that much. And if Trump gets out and anybody but Yang gets in, I really don't see anything coming from that. Look, Amy and Steyer are not clapping.
I believe that the way we beat Trump is by having the largest voter turnout in the history of this country.
And that's by getting someone like Yang nominated, because I didn't vote before, and the only person I'm voting for is for Andrew Yang.
And that is appealing to working class people who have given up on the political process because they don't believe that anybody is hearing their pain, perceiving their pain, feeling their pain. And we got to bring young people into the political process.
I'm not a young person that's going to get behind a person who is twice my age and has no idea how there is no working because the technology has taken out the working. After I graduated university, I could not become a part of the working class because all the jobs were, and anyway, most jobs are cognitive more than they are just working and doing something. You're out of the loop, Mr. Sanders. I'm sorry.
In Iowa, we won the popular vote by 6,000 votes. What was most significant is we increased voter turnout for young people under 29 by over 30%. We do that nationally, we're going to defeat Donald Trump.
Let me follow up there, and then we'll move on. But back in Iowa, the turnout this year was about the same as it was in 2016, far below what it was in 2008 when President Obama won.
That's true, and that's a disappointment, and I think all of us probably could have done a better job in bringing out our supporters. But if there is...
Well, Yang, no one was working as hard as Yang. He had like 4 speeches and events a day with question and answer. Well, I'm sorry, like, you, Bernie, were stuck in the Senate, and Warren, and Klobuchar, but you always prayed to have the chance as Democrats to impeach Donald Trump, and you got that chance, and failed at it. So, I think it's Yang's turn.
A good spot, a good aspect about that campaign is that young people came out in higher numbers than they did.
I'm only coming out because of Yang.
During Obama's historic 2008 campaign. And if that happens nationally, we're going to win and defeat Trump.
Before I move on to Mayor Buttigieg, let me just ask,
please don't move on to Mayor Buttigieg.
Anyone else on the stage concerned about having a Democratic Socialist at the top of the Democratic ticket?
Yang, put your hand up.
I'm not.
Senator Klobuchar?
Here comes global warming.
Bernie and I work together all the time, but I think we are not going to be able to outdivide the divider in chief. And I think we need someone to head up this ticket that actually brings people with her instead of shutting them out. And when I look at a state like New Hampshire that had a very, very close election last time in 2016, I see a state that, yes, has a high voter turnout, fired up Democrats, just like my state, which, by the way, Bernie, when I led the ticket, had the highest voter turnout of any state in the country. But I add to that being able to bring in independents like you have in this state, as well as moderate Republicans, because there are so many of them out there.
The only thing that's going to bring out not just moderate Republicans, but people who are Republicans for life is Andrew Yang.
That are looking for a candidate. And truthfully, Donald Trump's worst nightmare is
Andrew Yang.
Candidate that will bring people in from the middle. The people.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's who Andrew Yang is.
That are tired of the noise and the nonsense, and they are tired of the tweets and the mean stuff, and they are looking for someone.
I'd actually welcome a lot of, whether it's anti-Yang or pro-Yang, Donald Trump, if you're listening to all this, I welcome any and all tweets about Andrew Yang. Please, be my guest.
And I would submit that is me.
Mr. Styler, is so...
I would submit that is Yang.
Problem.
I don't think there's any question, George, that after this week, there's a real threat that Donald Trump can get reelected. And I don't think there's any question.
Look at this guy. He was like the minute Trump got in, like, I always saw his ads on TV about impeach the president, impeach the president, impeach the president, and now he's been acquitted, and I don't know, it's kind of crazy.
Only way that we're going to beat him actually is the way that Bernie Sanders said, which is to get turnout across the spectrum of Democratic voters. And that means we're going to have to appeal across the spectrum.
Across the spectrum of Democratic voters, but not Republican or independent voters?
Moderates, progressives, and every group. So unless you can appeal to the diverse parts of the Democratic
Which you sure as hell can't, because you're a billionaire.
Party, including specifically the black community, including specifically Latinos. If you can't do that, then we can't beat Donald Trump in November, and we can't choose a candidate who can't do that, and I am doing that right now.
How the hell are you doing that right now? He put a tweet out on you that you were part of like the fossil fuel industry and you're speaking out against climate change. How can you do that right now?
With 24% of blacks down in South Carolina.
Call on Yang, you assholes.
Carolina, with high numbers in Nevada. That's what it's going to take is turnout, but turnout.
What it's going to take is a person who has practical solutions, and you don't.
Across the spectrum of Democratic voters, someone who can pull, as Amy said, everything together in every single way we're divided.
Andrew Yang, then Senator Warren, then
Oh, God.
Mayor Buttigieg.
First, let me say, America, it's great to be back on the debate stage.
Geesh, you're like a breath of fresh air, my man.
Thank you. I'm so excited, I want to give every American $1,000 a month.
Man, how can you not like this guy? I don't get it.
George, the entire capitalism-socialism dichotomy is completely out of date. And the fact is, when people were talking about these economic models, they did not foresee technology getting stronger, more powerful, capable of doing the work of thousands of humans in the blink of an eye.
Yep.
We have record high corporate profits in this country right now, but people in New Hampshire know what else are at record highs. Mental illness, stress, debt, substance abuse, overdoses.
Stupidity from presidential candidates who aren't named Andrew Yang.
Suicides. What we have to do is actually get the markets working to improve our family's way of life. Instead of following GDP and corporate profits off a cliff, we should be measuring our own health and
No, we should like follow democratic socialism off a cliff.
And wellness, life expectancy, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, clean air and clean water.
And freedom from like like media abuse. Like can we get freedom from mainstream media abuse on like the facts and logic?
The way forward is a new human-centered version of capitalism that actually uses the markets to improve our families' lives.
Senator Warren, you reportedly said back in 2018, I'm a capitalist to my bones. Senator Sanders says, I'm not.
You know what? Like, why don't you just follow up on that? No, don't ask them that. Ask them, Senator Warren, what do you just think about what Yang just said? That's the question I want to know. Or like, okay, like Mr. Yang just explained all this stuff. All you other people, like, what do you think about everything he just said? You know?
Is that your biggest difference with Senator Sanders?
Oh, Bernie and I have been friends for a long time. We have a lot of things in common. We have a lot of things that we differ on.
And you also call each other liars and you hate each other's guts in secret, even though you pretend to like each other, so yeah.
But you know, this fundamental question about how we bring our party together, we have to think about it in new ways. People across this country, whether they're Democrats, independents, or Republicans, understand that we've got a government right now that works great for those at the top, works great for giant drug companies, just not for people trying to get a prescription filled, works great for oil companies that want to drill everywhere, just not for the rest of us who see climate change bearing down upon us.
I don't see that bearing down upon me. I see financial rot bearing down upon me.
You see a government that works great for those who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers and make big campaign donations, and it's
well, you know what they say, justice has to be bought.
Not working so great for everyone else. That is corruption, pure and simple, and we need to call it out for what it is.
And what creates that corruption is an inhumane economy, and that's what Yang is addressing.
Corruption. And that's what we can run on.
And that's what democracy dollars can fix.
Bring our party together. It's an issue we can all agree on and fight for to end the corruption. We're the Democrats. We should be the party on the side of hardworking people.
Well, that's not what Bill did. And then if you were the party of hardworking people, like why did Obama pass those bailouts? Why didn't he bail out people instead of the banks? Obama was a Democrat, and he gave all that bailout money to the banks and corporations and all those people who screwed everything up in the first place. So I don't know what you're talking about, lady.
And we can bring in independents and Republicans on that. They hate the corruption as well. My anti-corruption plan, good for Republicans and Democrats. That's not only how we bring our party together, that's how we're going to win in November.
Mayor Buttigieg, early...
Well, actually, Yang, Yang doesn't really say that, oh, like, I'm gonna legislate this thing and, like, attack them like this. It's like, let's just circumvent all of their, BS by using their own rules against them. Like, Yang is smarter. He knows that with the democracy dollars, it'll just flush out all the lobbyist cash instead of trying to do some convoluted plan that may or may not pass.
Early in the campaign, you said that the word socialism has lost its power. It's mostly lost its meaning. Do you believe that, or worry it could be a potent weapon in a general election?
I'm not interested in the labels. I'm not interested in what Republicans are going to say. I'm interested in the style of politics that we need to put forward to actually, finally turn the page. In order to win, yes, but also in...
Okay, like, what does that look like? What are those specific policies? I don't need platitudes.
In order to govern. This is a moment where the next president is going to face challenges, the likes of which we hadn't even thought of a few years or decades ago. And politically, we're facing a fundamentally new problem with President Donald Trump. So the biggest risk we could take at a time like this would be to go up against that fundamentally new challenge by trying to fall back on the familiar. Or...
But isn't that you? You just like you steal all of Yang's talking points without implementing any of his solutions, though.
Trying to unite this country at a moment when we need that kind of unification, when our nominee is dividing people with a politics that says if you don't go all the way to the edge, it doesn't count. A politics that says it's my way or the highway.
Are you talking about Senator Sanders?
Yes, because we've got to bring as many people as we can into this process. Look.
And that's Yang.
All of us have been saying that we can build the majority that it's going to take in order to win. But the process of actually proving it is now underway. And now it comes to New Hampshire, a state that thinks for itself, is not going to be told what to do by anyone, and that has a very independent streak that is going to
a state that Yang grew up in.
Respond to those who are reaching out in a politics of addition and inclusion and belonging. Not one that beats people over the head and says they shouldn't even be on our side if we don't agree 100% of the time.
Senator Sanders, your response.
Needless to say, I've never said that, but let me tell you what I do say. The way you bring people together is by presenting an agenda that works for the working people of this country, not for the...
Okay, what about the people who can't work? What about the people who are having trouble finding jobs? What are they gonna do? Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're gonna guarantee them like a boring job? How about if they live in the middle of nowhere and you can't like create a job right next to them? What's gonna happen?
Class. The way you bring people together, Republicans, independents, Democrats, progressives, conservatives, you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
That's not going to do anything for these big cities like LA and New York and San Francisco, Chicago, and all this stuff that they need. $15 is like a poverty wage. And the minimum is something that you want to grow away from and you eventually want to make more, But with all of these contract jobs, it's not even going to matter.
The way you bring people together is to make it clear that we're not going to give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. They're going to...
And we're not going to give money to incompetent bureaucrats who don't help people in times of need. But that's exactly what you want to do.
Start paying their fair share of taxes. That's what the American people want.
And pay their fair share of taxes to who? Like a person who is immediately poor and struggling, or indirectly give those taxes that we're taking from these heartless companies. We take away the tax breaks from the heartless companies just so we can give it to a heartless bureaucrat? No, let's give it just directly to the person.
And I'll tell you something else. The way you bring people together is by ending the international disgrace of this country being the only major nation on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And you bring people together by telling the pharmaceutical industry they're not going to charge us 10 times more for the same prescription drugs as the people in Canada that borders on New Hampshire. That's how you bring people together and you defeat Donald Trump.
Mayor Buttigieg, you just heard Senator Sanders make health care the center of his speech. Do you think his health care plan can bring people together?
I think there's a better way. It's true. The American people are ready. There's a
And I think you don't have that better way.
Historic majority right now. Even broader than what was available to President Obama a decade ago, there is now a majority ready to act to make sure there is no such thing as an uninsured American and no such thing as an unaffordable prescription. Just so long as we don't commit.
Look, I don't want to be ageist or anything, but as a younger person who is in relatively good health, my beef is with the financial situation that has so many younger people locked up and not being able to do anything, and it's not being addressed over here.
People to accept a public plan if they don't want to. That's the idea of Medicare for all who want it. My point is, what I am offering is campaigning for all of these things that America wants. Yes, higher wages.
I want you to shut up. The only way that you can campaign to that is to close your mouth.
Doubling the rate of unionization in this country, making corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share, delivering health care and college affordability, but also offering a way to do these game-changing transformations that will actually galvanize and energize, not polarize, the American people.
And that's what Andrew Yang is doing. So, yeah, just drop out, endorse him, and let's get this show on the road. Okay? You look Norwegian, but I think that Andrew Yang can help us to out Sweden. You're Norwegian on the outside, but you're rugged individual capitalist on the inside. I think Andrew is like Asian on the outside, but Scandinavians like him more than they like you. Thank you, mister.
That is not only what we need in order to win, it's what we need in order to govern and actually get these things done.
Vice President Biden, how do you unify the country?
Well, look, Bernie says that you have to bring people together and we have to have Medicare for all. But Bernie says, and he says he wrote the damn thing, but he's unwilling to tell us what the damn thing's going to cost. The fact that we're in New Hampshire, very level-headed.
I actually do not disagree with that.
Group of people, look at the numbers. How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it?
Somebody get Yang in here. He's the only one that can do math.
It will cost more than the entire federal budget we spend now. More than the entire budget. The idea middle-class taxes aren't going to go up is just crazy. When they did it in Vermont, what happened? They doubled the state income tax and then had a 14% tax on withholding, and they finally did away with it. So how much is it going to cost? When you ask Bernie that, I'll ask him again tonight sometime. If you ask Bernie that, he says, go figure. I don't know. We'll find out. I think that was on CBS. He said, we'll find out, or something to that effect. Imagine you're going to unite the country, walking into the Congress, say, I got this bill. It's going to be...
Here's Joe Biden and his righteous indignation.
Provide Medicare for everybody. I can't tell you how much it's going to cost. We'll find out later. It's likely to be double whatever everything we spend in the federal government. Who do you think is going to get that passed? I busted my neck getting Obamacare passed, getting every Democratic vote. I know how hard it is.
Senator Sanders.
Well, for a start, what the studies show, if we do what Joe wants, we'll be spending some $50 trillion on healthcare over the next 10 years.
Okay, healthcare. I'm sorry, you guys, but healthcare is just a topic that I have no passion for. It's more when you're healthy, but you want an opportunity in the form of work that you can feel happy about, that you can feel that you're contributing, you can feel like that it's helping other people and it has meaning, but you're kind of, healthcare is the last thing on my mind as a younger person who has a lot of vitality. The first thing on my mind is this economic situation keeping us trapped, and not exactly healthcare, but that's just me.
It's the status quo, Joe. That's what Health and Human Services says. What we have got to do, Joe, what we have got to do is understand. Simple question, Joe. We are spending twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that the healthcare industry last year made $100 billion in profit. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that we are wasting $500 billion a year trying to administer thousands and thousands of different plans.
Right. And it's funny, like, he brings up the price tag of how much bureaucracy administration costs, but Yang gets rid of all of that with a freedom dividend.
What Medicare for All will do is save the average American substantial sums of money. Substantial, be much less expensive than your plan. And we will expand Medicare to include dental care, eyeglasses, hearing
dental care
aids, and home health care as well.
Vice President Biden, 30-second response, then Senator Klobuchar after that.
30-second
30-second response.
30-second response. My proposal gives you a choice. You're going to be covered. You have Medicare.
Andrew's proposal gives a choice too.
If you want it, you turn off. We're going to restore all the cuts that they made in Obamacare. We're going to reduce drug prices, reduce prescription prices, reduce co-pays, etc. And it costs a lot of money. It costs $750 billion over 10 years. I tell you how I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to raise the capital gains rate so you pay capital gains and what your tax rate is. That'll pay for it. That's $800 billion. But here's the deal. The fact is that it's going to cost, Bernie's plan costs double what the taxpayers are paying.
Double the fund.
For every single program we spend on in the United States of America.
Senator Klobuchar.
I keep listening to this same debate, and it is not real. It is not real, Bernie, because 2/3 of the Democrats in the Senate are not on your bill, and because it would kick 149 million Americans off their current health insurance in 4 years. And let me say what else. Elizabeth wants to do it in 2 years, and Pete, while you have a different plan now, you sent out a tweet just a few years ago that said, henceforth, forthwith, indubitably, affirmatively, you are for Medicare for all.
Look at that rat.
All for the ages. And so I would like to point out that what leadership is about is taking a position, looking at things, and sticking with them. I have long believed that the way...
Oh, gosh. This thing between Klobuchar and Buttigieg is like two, fourth graders, duking it out.
That we expand health care to more people and bring down premiums is by building on the Affordable Care Act with a nonprofit public option. That is the best way to do it. And practically, look at this. The Affordable Care Act is now nearly 10 points more popular than the President of the United States. So why would we talk about blowing it up? What we need to do is build on it.
Yang, get a word in edgewise, please. I can't take it anymore. Say something.
Mental health care, addiction,
It's bad for my mental health to watch all of you talk. The only thing that relieves my mental health is hearing Andrew Yang.
Long-term care, those are the things that would make it better.
Senator Warren and Mayor Buttigieg, you were both invoked. I want you each to respond and then go back to Senator Sanders.
So,
When is Yang going to get a chance?
I think we need to think about health care a little differently, and that is 36 million Americans last year couldn't afford to have a prescription filled, and that includes people with health insurance. I want everyone in here to think about what that means. They were worried enough or sick enough that they went to a doctor. A doctor looked at it and said, that's serious enough to write a prescription. They walked out and then said, it's either that or groceries. It's that or pay the rent on time. We have got to change our health care system. The way help to the most people as quickly as we can. How about we start with what a president can do? I love saying this, all by herself. On day one, I will defend the Affordable Care Act, and I will use march-in orders to reduce the cost of commonly used
And this healthcare stuff is really just getting me bored.
prescription drugs like insulin and HIV/AIDS.
Okay, please, how many of you in comments, like, put down, what's your biggest, thing? Is it healthcare or is it the economy? What is affecting you the most? But they're very intertwined.
Drugs and EpiPens. We can start making healthcare better for Americans from the beginning, but we have to agree to do that. We are the Democrats. We are on the side of expanding.
Oh, give me a break. The Democrats also instituted slavery. Just stop.
Healthcare. When we come up against Donald Trump,
Like, who cares about labels? We want solutions.
the team that has been trying to take away health care from millions of people, what's going to matter most is we are the people on the side of those who need health care across this country. That's who Democrats are.
Mayor Buttigieg, I want you to respond to that, but also take on the argument at the beginning from the vice president that you don't have the right experience to be president.
Sure. Well, first of all, just to be clear, the truth is that I have been consistent throughout.
You have experience in, like, rigging things with that app that you funded.
In my position on delivering health care for every American. And as to experience, I just bring a different perspective. Look, I freely admit.
You don't bring a different perspective. You just copy Yang and just subtly don't talk about the actual solutions. You just copy Yang when you talk about the problems.
That if you're looking for the person with the most years of Washington establishment experience under their belt, you've got your candidate, and of course it's not me. The perspective I'm bringing is
look at Joe. What a dumbass.
That of somebody whose life has been shaped by the decisions that are made in those big white buildings in Washington, D.C.
But then another person's life is going to be shaped through the decisions that you make in your wine cave. Like, the abuse is just going to repeat itself.
Somebody who has guided a community written off as dying just a decade ago through a historic transformation. Somebody who knows what it means to be sent to war on...
Somebody who let his homeless population suffer because when they had all that stuff under the underpass, you just, like got rid of all of it and didn't even care that it was their things. Somebody who's inhumane.
Orders that come out of the Situation Room. We need a perspective right now that will finally allow us to leave the politics of the past in the past, turn the page, and bring change to Washington.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's Andrew Yang. It's not you.
Before it's too late.
Vice President Biden, here's his answer.
The politics of the past, I think, were not all that bad. I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. I managed...
Yeah. They were terrible.
The $900 billion Recovery Act, which in fact put millions and millions of dollars into his city before he came and helped save his city. I was able to do it.
You mean the bailouts? That was terrible.
I was able to pass the chemical weapons ban, arms control, and I was the first major leader holding public office to call for same-sex marriage.
Like back in my day, these were all the laws that I passed.
So I don't know what about the past of Barack Obama and Joe Biden was so bad.
The bailouts, you idiot! Like, you could have easily used that money for a universal basic income. That was terrible! That was freaking... Do you know how bad that was for me and my generation, you stupid idiot? Like how much economic suffering that stupid idea created thanks to you and the Republicans and the rest of the corrupt boomers. I'm not talking about the good boomers. I'm talking about the corrupt boomers. You corrupt Washington boomers and establishment have ruined the lives of my fellow millennials. So, dude, the hell's wrong with you?
Happened. What is it that he wants to do away with?
If it wasn't that bad, we wouldn't have Trump right now.
We were just beginning. It was just the beginning of what will be.
The beginning? You had 2 terms. How was that just the beginning?
The future.
And the bailouts happened at the beginning of your first term, and you're calling it the beginning? What the hell?
Moving this country beyond where it is now in significant ways, and there's ways to do that, and one of the ways...
Well, there were a lot of people, maybe those coal miners, or maybe those manufacturing workers that your stupid ass told how to learn to code didn't appreciate your just the beginning, you dumbass.
Ways to do that is to make sure you have someone who knows how to get things done and can lead the free world at the same time.
If you got things done, we wouldn't have Trump right now.
Mayor Buttigieg respond, then Senator Sanders.
Those achievements were phenomenally important because they met the moment. But now we have to meet this moment.
Oh, I never said I get this. I agree with Buttigieg. Look at Biden's shit-eating grin. Like, the only thing... Okay, at least Buttigieg, like, you're young, but you're still, like, terrible. But, I don't know, maybe the older people are just as bad as you are, and you're just as bad as them.
And this moment is different. The next president is going to face challenges from global health security.
Well, okay, I agree with that on there, but that's why this movement needs Yang.
Like what we're seeing coming out of China, to cybersecurity and election security challenges that were barely thought of a few years ago. And here at home, we're seeing things like gig work transform what it means to be a worker in America.
Yeah, that's why we need universal basic income. So why don't you talk about that?
Ways that were barely conceived of not that long ago. We cannot solve the problems before us by looking back. We have to be ready to turn the page.
Oh, thank you.
And change our politics before it's too late.
Exactly, Yang 2020.
And I'm seeing everywhere I go, not just fellow Democrats, but a striking number of independents and what I like to call future former Republicans ready to join in that historic American majority to turn the page.
Senator Klobuchar.
I am.
Look at them, like fighting over their time. Yang, do something.
I am listening to this about meeting the moment. And my first thought is, I'm a fresh face up here for a presidential debate, and I figure, Pete, that 59, my age, is the new 38 up here.
Oh, get lost, bitch.
The second thing I think about is this.
I hate all of their shit-eating grins. Ugh.
And that is...
50.
Okay, there you go. Meeting the moment,
It's not funny for young people whose lives you screwed over with all of your stupid decisions. Every single young person that wasn't born into privilege and wealth isn't exactly enamored by the job that you geezers were doing and the collaborators who were younger than you.
We had a moment the last few weeks, Mayor, and that moment was these impeachment hearings. And there was a lot of courage that you saw from only a few people. There was courage from Doug Jones, our friend of Alabama, who took that tough vote. There was courage from Mitt Romney, who took a very, very difficult vote. There was courage, as I read today, about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman being escorted.
Yeah, okay, but what has this got to do with the solutions that you people just attacking each other, and you're not providing any in-depth policy solutions to anything?
Out of the White House. What he took courage. But what you said, Pete, as you were campaigning through Iowa, as 3 of us were jurors in that impeachment hearing, you said it was exhausting to watch and that you wanted to
He's right.
turn the channel and watch cartoons.
Not bad.
It is easy to go after Washington because that's a popular thing to do. It is much harder, as I see Senator Shaheen in the front row, such a leader. It is much harder to lead. And
actually, no. Like, I could do the jobs of you Senate numbskulls with both hands tied behind my back. I'd make a way better leader than any of you schmucks any day of the week. So don't toot your own horn over here, global warming.
Much harder to take those difficult positions because I think
this isn't about leading. This isn't about taking positions. This is about inflating your already overinflated egos and giving platitudes. And Andrew Yang is the only one with the solutions and actually thinking about the real problems. Stop flattering yourselves. It's disgusting.
I think this going after every single thing that people do because it's popular to say and makes you look like a cool newcomer. I don't think that's what people want right now.
No, well, I want Yang right now. Right now, I want people like you to shut up and let Yang talk.
We have a newcomer in the White House, and look where it got us. I think having some experience is a good thing.
Senator Sanders, then Mayor Buttigieg.
George, can I say, at the end of the day,
at the end of the day, all of you suck except Andrew Yang.
we got to ask ourselves a very simple question, whether it's healthcare, in fact, or anything else. Why are we the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare to all people, pay the highest prices in the world?
Because we're monsters, okay? We get it. But how are we going to stop being monsters? With solutions. Not by talking about the problems 1,000 times in a row and coming up with pie-in-the-sky ideas we have no idea how to implement.
For prescription drugs, have 87 million people uninsured or underinsured. 30,000 die because they don't get to a doctor on time. And 500,000 people going bankrupt. For what reason? Because they have cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's.
Or what about all the students who you want to make free college? What about all the students who went to college? Maybe they'll go for free, but they just wasted 4 years to become a barista. Even with zero debt, how are they going to afford their living expenses? And this has nothing to do with healthcare. This has to do with our schooling system being shit, and you people not even understanding that free college isn't going to be a panacea to that.
Question, why is it? Why have we been talking about healthcare in this country for 100 years? And here is the answer. If you want real change in healthcare, at the end of the day, you're going to have to take on the insurance companies.
At the end of the day, there's nothing new under the sun about what you're talking about.
And tell them the function of healthcare is healthcare for all, not huge profits for the insurance company.
Call on Yang. Look, Bernie's pointing at Yang. Call on him.
You're going to have to take on the drug companies and their corruption.
What about taking on the universities and their corruption? What about taking on the bloated administration and their corruption? What about taking on the bureaucrats and their corruption? Your plans, Mr. Sanders, would give more power to incompetent, corrupt bureaucrats instead of the people, and that is the last thing that I want to see in this country.
And they're price fixing, and tell them, sorry, we're not going to pay 10 times more for prescription drugs than do the people of other countries. But at the end of the day, there's no way.
This is his third end of the day.
Around it. You may want to nibble around the edges, but ultimately we need to rally the American people to tell the drug companies, to tell Wall Street, to tell the insurance companies, to tell the fossil fuel industry, this country belongs.
Yang should get like a megaphone and just scream it into the microphone that he has.
To all of us, not a handful of special.
Mayor Buttigieg, wrap this up and then we...
Oh, go to hell, you stupid moderator. Yang had his hand up, you jackass.
I have heard this conversation on this debate stage from these people.
Oh, look at that. And Tom Steyer talks. Yang, butt in.
Now, every single debate, and they're all right. Everybody on this stage is better on economic justice and health care than anybody in the Republican Party, and 1,000,000 times better than Donald Trump. That is not the question in front of us today. The question in
The question in front of us is, how the hell did you get on the debate stage? You're just a billionaire.
front of us today is, how are we going to beat Donald Trump? You were in the Clinton campaign in 1992, and the mantra was, it's the economy, stupid. Well, if you look at what Mr. Trump is saying, he's saying those words. It's the economy, stupid. I trust every one of these people 1,000,000 times more. But we're going to have to take Mr. Trump down on the economy, because if you listen to him, he's crowing about it every single day, and he's going to beat us unless we can take him
That's what I said.
down on the economy, stupid.
That's what Yang is talking about.
And that's the issue here. It is not about who has the best health care plan. All the health care plans are better, 1,000,000 times better. The question is, who can go toe-to-toe with Mr. Trump? Who can
Andrew Yang.
take down Mr. Trump, because he's the real threat to the country. And let me say, you have to have experience to take him down.
That you don't have.
This is not a question of he's a nice guy who's going to listen. We need people with experience. That's why I'm worried about Mayor Pete.
Yang, why couldn't you butt in like this and just let off? Why? Yang, please, like, you don't make all the footwork that we do with the Yang Gang. Please make it count on the debate stage instead of this privileged jackass.
You need to be able to go toe-to-toe with this guy and take him down on the debate stage, or
Yang, like, bang your fist on the table.
we're going to lose. And that's actually the issue in front of Democratic voters. I have heard this debate so many darn times, and I love all these people, and they're all right. If we win, we can get the right thing, Bernie. I am with you. If we win, we can get the right thing, Pete and Amy. But we got to win, or we are in deep trouble, and we keep
And then call on Yang.
not talking about the facts.
Mayor Pete.
Here's how we're going to win.
Man, I hate these moderators so much.
Here's how we're going to win. We're going to force this president to stand on that debate stage next to somebody who actually lives in a middle-class neighborhood in the industrial Midwest, in the exact kind of community that
Why don't you invite him to your wine cave, Pete? Why don't we just have a debate in the wine cave with you and that orange gorilla? And then you can throw wine bottles at each other, idiot.
tends to speak for but turns his back on.
Like you?
We're going to put up somebody who's not afraid to call out things like his disgraceful behavior at the National Prayer Breakfast and remind Americans that God does not belong to a political party. We're going to win by having somebody up there who can call him to account for his refusal to
That's Yang. Yang doesn't have wine
serve
caves.
when it was his turn and remind him what serving this country is really about. If we want to beat this president, we've got to be ready to move on from the playbook that we have relied on in the past and unify this country around a new and better vision. That's how we're going
That's what Yang
to
has.
win. And when I talk about exhaustion, this is important, because I got to tell you, the American people
Are exhausted of people like you.
from outside of Washington, we feel a sense of exhaustion watching the division and the dysfunction there. And that is not to take anything away from the very good work that you and our other Democratic members of Congress and the Senate are doing.
Look, Yang's trying to talk. They're
It's
just
not. But the reason I raise that sense of exhaustion is I see it. I see that temptation to walk away from it all among so many people that I've spoken to in communities from Claremont to Manchester and in the other states that we're in. And the important thing for the American people to remember is this is 2020. It's an election year. And if the Senate was the jury before, you are the jury now. The American people are the jury that will have the final.
If I was the jury, I'd mark all of you as guilty as being egotistical, overinflated sense of pride, and being full of crap, except Andrew Yang. That's what I would do. I would just say you all have overinflated egos and no solutions, and Yang is the only one that can win this.
Verdict on this president and on the senators in the GOP who protected him.
Pete, fundamentally, you are missing the lesson of Donald Trump's victory.
Yep.
Donald Trump is not the cause of all of our problems, and we're making a mistake when we act like he is.
That's right.
He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for
A disease ever since I was born in this country. This disease has been building up. I'm 31 right now, and ever since I was born, the disease that has led to Trump has been building up. Ever since my birth in this country.
years and decades, and it is our job to get to the harder work of actually curing the disease. Most Americans feel like the political parties have been playing you lose, I lose for years, and
and the people are just a volleyball to these idiots.
Who's been losing this entire time? We have. Our communities have. Our communities' way of life is disintegrating beneath our feet. That's why Iowa, a traditional swing
The floor is becoming lava.
state, went to Trump by almost 10 points. That's why Ohio, a traditional swing state, is now so red that I'm told we're not even going to campaign there. So these communities are seeing their way of life get blasted into smithereens. We've automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs and counting. We're closing 30% of New Hampshire stores and malls, and Amazon, the force behind that, is literally paying zero in taxes. These are the changes that Americans are seeing and feeling around us every day, and if we get to the hard work of curing those problems, we will not just defeat Donald Trump in the fall, but we'll actually be able to move our communities forward.
I know we're going to hear a lot more on this. We're going to move on.
Thank you. Oh, you're gonna move on. The most logical, sensible thing that made the most sense and can really get Donald Trump out of the White House. You want to move on from that, you morons.
Thank you, George. Good evening, candidates. We come to you, of course, just 48 hours after the acquittal of President Trump.
He said, stop talking about Trump and let's address the real issues. And then you say we're going to move on. And then what do you move on to? Talking about Trump. You idiots are the problem.
Crystallize the divide in our country. Senator Warren, I want to start with you. You have said that on day one of your presidency, one of your first orders of business will be to order your justice.
One of my first orders of business is getting rid of the style of debates that you stupid news stations are putting on.
Justice Department to launch new investigations into the Trump administration. After a grueling impeachment and what is likely to be a polarizing election, is investigating President Trump the best way to try to unify the country?
Look, I think no one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States. We watched on Wednesday as Republicans, all but one, locked arms to protect him from impeachment. But we need to reestablish the rule of law in this country. I believe in an independent...
What is this going to do to help my economic situation, you stupid bastards?
...commission in our Justice Department.
Do you think somebody who is on their last $300 in the bank when the rent is due somewhere in our country, about to be evicted from their house, gives a flying fuck about anything that you idiots are talking about right now?
That investigates crimes committed by our own government. It is an important part of accountability. It is an important part for every administration that we hold ourselves accountable to the American people. Look, people around this country are losing faith in our government.
And they're also losing their houses, and you're not addressing that.
They're losing faith that government works for them. They see a government that just works great if you're rich. It works great if you're a lobbyist. It works great if you're a corporate executive.
Democracy dollars. Yang spoke about it 1,000 times. Give people purchase. Oh my God.
But they see themselves and their children with less and less and less. And we could do something about it. It's not enough simply to talk about the future. We have to be willing to stand up to those who now control our government and make that government instead work for us. We can do child care.
No, what does child care have to do with people losing their jobs and not making enough money to feed their damn kids?
In this country, for every baby, we can invest in...
Okay, so what is child care? They have a babysitter? Oh, okay, free babysitter, but you don't have any money for a job, so no food in the fridge. You people are so stupid. God.
Schools. We can
Again. Here we go again. Public schools. Okay, like my parents have no money. I have no food, but this textbook sure looks appetizing. Huh, Warren? Dumbass?
Cancel student loan debt for 43 million Americans, but only if we are willing to take control of our government away from the giant corporations and billionaires, return it to the people. This is about our government. This is about our democracy.
This is about people like you being out of touch morons and taking airtime from people like Andrew Yang, who have all the solutions, thanks to all of your corrupt mainstream media jackasses who protect all of you and marginalize the voices of the people who actually want their voices heard. This is what it's about.
This is about our future.
Mr. Yang, you
Finally.
said that the notion of a leader, quote, throwing the president before them in jail is not the way things are done here in the United States and would make it, quote, very hard for any party to govern sustainably moving forward. Does that mean that any alleged misconduct by the president or his administration should not be investigated?
There are, of course...
You know what? Help that person who is on the streets and is starving and is about to lose everything, and then and only then, let's worry about investigating Trump. Let's straighten out our goddamn priorities, okay?
Limits, and you have to see what the facts are on the ground after you assume office. But the fact is, if you look around the world, the countries that have thrown past presidents into jail have generally been developing countries. And unfortunately, that's a pattern that once you establish is very, very hard to break. What's a more American tradition? We move the country forward. We don't focus on the mistakes of the leaders that are leaving office. Most Americans do not care about what a particular individual did so much as they care about their families, well-being, their community.
Well, that's just what I said, except he just put it in a very nice, not angry way.
Their town. That's where Americans focus wants.
No, put your hand down, Warren, please.
They want
We've heard enough from all of you. You all suck, except Yang.
American president. They want the president, of course, the American president. Sorry about that. They want the president to be focused on that, and that's where our attention should be.
Yang, you're smiling, but I'm not. I'm laughing now, but I'm just hiding all this frustration.
We should not fall into a pattern that has been disastrous in other countries.
Senator Sanders.
Along with Elizabeth and Amy, we sat...
But not Yang? Oh, yeah. Okay, I get what you're saying.
...for 2 weeks listening to the impeachment process. And here's what I think the horror and the danger of what happened was: not only the acquittal of Trump, who in fact committed impeachable offenses and obstructed Congress, it is the precedent that it set. The precedent that it set. And what that precedent is about...
The president?
Now is in the future. You're going to have presidents who say, hey, Governor, you want highway money? You better support me, or you're not going to get it because I am the president. I can do anything I want. Hey, Congress, you want to investigate me? Don't be ridiculous. Who cares about the Congress? Who cares about the separation of powers? Who cares about the Constitution of the president? I'm the president of the United States. I have all of the power. And I have
all of the power. I am your king.
To intimidate members of my own party. The saddest aspect of this whole thing is you have Republicans in the Senate who knew better. They knew that Donald Trump is a crook. They knew that Donald Trump is a cheat. But they didn't have the gut.
And I know that none of you have plans, and only Yang does.
With the exception of Romney, to vote against him.
Mr.
That is a sad day.
So,
but you were all calling for the impeachment.
I did start the need to impeach movement in October of 2017. And my father...
And that was when they had less evidence against Trump than they do now. Just imagine what a flop it would be if we actually started it back then. It's already flopped now.
My father was one of the people who prosecuted the Nazi war criminals after World War II. And that's part of the reason I started, because when you see something really wrong in the United States, you're supposed to stand up against it and fight against it, and that's what I was doing. But the Republicans have rolled over. They've had a sham trial. They've refused to have witnesses. They've covered up the truth for the American people. And it doesn't matter anymore that he's a crook, and he's always been a crook, and he always will be a crook. Right now, what we have to do is we have to beat him in November. And we have to beat him because he's incompetent and bad for the American people. And that's the case we have to make now. Is he a crook? I knew that 2 years ago. Is he going to be more?
Yeah, this is really getting all the former Trump supporters on all of your sides. I really think that people who voted for him before are just ecstatic to hear you guys say all these things about him while ignoring the reason he was voted for in the first place.
Now that he believes he can get away with anything, of course he is. But the job of the people on this stage is to beat him in November. And that's going to be based on what we can deliver for the American people. The fact that he's incompetent as a president, his economy isn't delivering for working people. The jobs don't pay enough for people to live on. We've got to take him down.
And that's what helps when you have universal basic income.
On the economy and get him out of the White House as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Steyer. Impeachment is, of course, over, but Republicans in Congress have already started investigating Vice President Biden's son, Hunter. Mayor Buttigieg, do you think that there's a danger for the Democratic Party to nominate a candidate who is still under the threat of investigation?
No. And we're not going to let them change the subject. This is not about Hunter Biden or Vice President Biden or any Biden. This is about an abuse of power by the president.
Look at Biden, you said.
Look, the Vice President and I and all of us are competing, but we've got to draw a line here. And to be the kind of president, to be the kind of human being who would seek to turn someone against his own son, who would seek to weaponize a son against his own father, is an unbelievably dishonorable thing that is just one more example of why we as a...
Okay, yeah, we're talking about people of privilege, but why don't you think about it this way? How about all the poor people who are being taken away from their parents because their parents are deemed not viable economically, so they have to go live in some kind of foster home when a universal basic income could have helped that? What about all the sons and daughters of people in this country who are having trouble in school because they're malnourished? That too. I'm okay, but the last person I'm worried about are the Bidens because they have millions of dollars. But what about all the people losing their sons and daughters to a kind of sickening poverty that a universal basic income would address tomorrow? What about that?
Have to be completely united in doing whatever it takes at the end of the day to make sure that this president does not get a second term.
Vice President Biden.
Look, I thank my colleague for saying that. It is a diversion. But here's the deal. Whomever the nominee is, the president's going to make up lies about. He thinks he has free reign right now. One of the things that I think is really important...
He hasn't made any lies about Andrew Yang, though.
...is we have to be authentic with the American people about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And by the way, Colonel Vindman got thrown out of the White House today, walked out. I think we should, and at the same time, he should be pinning a medal on Vindman and not on Rush Limbaugh. And I think...
Limbaugh.
I think what we should be doing now... I think we should all stand and give Colonel Vindman a show of how much we supported him. Stand up and clap for Vindman.
Whoa, what is this, a dictatorship?
Get up there. Who we are. That's who we are. We are not what Trump is.
Thank you, Vice President Biden.
So now we're all going to be sheep and just do what the person wants us to do?
The Democratic Party's last presidential nominee, Hillary Clinton, has criticized Senator Bernie Sanders' track record in the Senate.
I'm sure we were able to hear that question.
Okay, sure. The Democratic Party's last presidential nominee, Hillary Clinton, has criticized Senator Bernie Sanders' record in the Senate, saying nobody likes him, nobody wants to work with him, he got nothing done. Senator Klobuchar, you serve.
Oh, what a stab in the back.
Serve with Senator Sanders in the Senate. Is he going to be able to get the support? Not if you like it, but is he going to be able to get the support that he needs from Republicans?
Okay. I like Bernie just fine. We actually have worked together on a number of things, including pharmaceuticals. We actually had a vote late at night one time, Klobuchar-Sanders amendment, to bring in less...
Sanders
No, it was not. It was not. To bring in less expensive drugs from other countries, since in this great state of New Hampshire, like in Minnesota and Vermont, we can see Canada from our porch. And we ended up getting, I think, 14 Republican votes. And they might not have noticed what was happening late at night, but we got those. And I think that it is just an example of what we need to do here, because I've been listening to this discussion. I agree with my colleagues. We must unite. But the way that we unite is by having an optimistic economic agenda for America. That is what we must do. And that means taking on...
And that means things like a freedom dividend and a universal basic income.
A president, if you want to talk about being tough enough to take him on, taking on a president that literally went down to Mar-a-Lago after he signed that Republican tax bill and looked at all his friends and said, you just got a lot richer. That is Exhibit A for those carpenters in Pennsylvania and those dairy farmers in Wisconsin and those dock workers that I met with in Michigan. That is an Exhibit A. And we have to be able to make the case to the working
and the rest of the Democrats have gotten a whole lot dumber.
People of this country, some of whom voted for Donald Trump, that we have something better to offer. That we are going to...
We have Yang! Yes! Yes!
...to take those incredibly regressive parts of that tax bill and put that money into their child care,
Senator, but just a quick yes or no. Do you think that Senator Sanders will be able to get Republican support in order to pass his bills?
That I don't know. I know we did on that bill, but the point is, I think we're better off with someone that has the receipts, someone that has actually won big time with Republicans and independents. And I'm the only one up on this stage, you can check it out, that has consistently won in...
But you're still a creature of the establishment, and that's just not going to cut it.
Red congressional districts, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And when I did it, I didn't just do it for me. I led a ticket. I flipped the state house every single time because I have a way of working with people that I think should be valued.
Yeah, you really have a way of working with your interns. Then one of those emails I saw, you really have a way of like throwing staplers and binders and berating people who are under you. Yeah, you got away all right. You do get away with it too. You get away with your way. So there you go.
Candidates, and it's one of the reasons that I got the New York Times endorsement along with Elizabeth, and that I got the endorsements of the 3 major papers.
I can't stand the New York Slimes, and I think they suck, and they just did a hit piece on Andrew Yang, so yeah, I'm disgusted by that.
Here in New Hampshire, which is the Union Leader, the Seacoast Papers, and the Keene Sentinel. I think that matters. Read those editorials, and you will get a sense of what I'm about.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sanders.
I must confess, I don't get too many newspaper editorial support. Must confess that.
You got the Conway endorsement.
I did. We're very proud of that.
There we go.
But let me just say this. I think the question started off with Secretary Clinton's critique. I think, quite honestly, as we face one of the great political crises facing America, our job is to look forward and not back to 2000.
Then why do you want to go back to a socialist capitalist paradigm when Yang said we're past that?
In 2016. And I hope that Secretary Clinton and all of us can come together and move in that direction. Now, second of all,
probably not.
In terms of Republicans, let me say that in my own great state of Vermont, my memory is correct, Amy, I got 25% of the Republican vote. And in fact, there were periods when I was in the House of Representatives, a number of years, where I passed more amendments on the floor of the House in a bipartisan way than any other member of the House. And that is when you bring people together on an issue. There are many conservative Republicans, for example, who are concerned about civil liberties. At least they used to be concerned about civil liberties. There are Republicans, as you know, who are concerned about the high cost of prescription drugs.
I'm concerned about the mental health of our candidates and why they can never come up with solutions, and they just complain about everything all the time, and they don't have a specific policy proposals to address what we're going to face in the future, and they just look to the past. That's what I'm concerned about.
There are ways that we can work with Republicans on issues where we have a common basis. Let's do that.
David.
Lindsay, thank you. Good evening, all. I want to turn to America's role in the world and readiness to be commander-in-chief on day one. Just this week, you saw it, during the State of the Union, President Trump offered an indication of what he'll tout on the campaign trail. He celebrated the U.S. airstrike that killed top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, saying Soleimani was the Iranian regime's most ruthless butcher, a monster who murdered or wounded thousands of American service members in Iraq. Mayor Buttigieg, you're the only veteran standing on this stage, and while there's still debate about whether or not there was an imminent threat, there is no debate about whether or not Soleimani was a bad actor who was responsible for the deaths of many Americans. Given what you know about Soleimani, if your national security team came to you with an opportunity to strike, would Soleimani have been dead, or would he still be alive under your presidency?
In the situation that we saw with President Trump's decision, there is no evidence that that made our country safer. Look, I feel very strongly about the campaign of murder and mayhem that General Soleimani and his units have perpetrated. It's also the case that if we learned nothing else from the war in Iraq, it's that taking out a bad guy is not a good idea if you do not know what you were doing. This president has moved us this much closer to the brink of war, but it didn't start with the Soleimani strike. It started with withdrawing us from the Iran nuclear deal that his own administration certified.
Okay, he's an idiot. We get it.
Was working. And it's time for us to recognize that every time a step is taken that moves us to the brink of war, that has incredibly serious consequences for those who serve. By chance, just because I was traveling for the campaign, not long ago I ran into somebody that I hadn't seen since we were both serving. Hadn't seen since she was injured in an insider attack. And I saw her coming down the concourse in the airport wearing a Wounded Warrior Project t-shirt that said, "Some assembly required." And when I asked her how she was doing, she lifted up her knee and tapped on the part of her leg that they couldn't save, tapped on the prosthetic, and said the Navy had fixed her up just fine.
Okay.
And then let me know that she was looking forward to an upcoming deployment. People in our uniform will do whatever the United States requires of them. What they deserve in return is a president who will actually read the intelligence, pay attention to the
In this case, I guess they're reading the stupidity.
international security situation, consult with our allies, keep U.S. politics out of it, and never commit our troops to a situation where they would have to go into harm's way if there is an alternative.
Mayor Buttigieg, let me just press further on this, though, because President Trump has signaled in a general election campaign he will celebrate his willingness to order that strike. I'm asking, if your national security team came to you and presented you with the opportunity, would you take the strike?
It depends on the circumstances. It depends if there was an alternative, and it depends what the different effects would be. That's my point. This is not an episode of 24. This is a situation that requires that you actually evaluate the entire intelligence picture. This president has insulted the intelligence community, but they put their lives on the line to gather the information that will help a decision maker evaluate whether or not something like that is justified. And I don't think he even reads it. And here we have a situation where the world, one of the most volatile places in the world, has just become more dangerous at the hands of a president who has no regard for the military. Not only punishing a war hero today with what he did to Colonel Vindman, but pardoning war criminals in a way that undermines the entire sense of good order and discipline and military honor. We deserve a better commander-in-chief.
Mayor Buttigieg, thank you. I do want to take this to Vice President Biden next, because we know that the Obama administration was aware of the threat that Soleimani posed. So was the Bush administration before it. I'm asking tonight, as Commander-in-Chief, though, would you have ordered the strike?
No, and the reason I wouldn't have ordered the strike, there's no evidence yet of imminent threat that was going to come from him. Look what happened.
I think I'm going to skip this part.
His America First policy has made America alone. You cannot think of a time, David, and as long as you've been alive.
Here is the danger, David. There are very bad leaders all over the world. Kim Jong-un in North Korea.
And then there are very bad leaders as in forms of like the just CEOs in the United States who just underpay their workers, leave them open to all kinds of harassment, and like was it people on Wall Street who make bad financial decisions, who end up with other people losing their homes, but we never do anything about them, do we? I mean, like. Seriously.
Is probably responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of his people, threatening all of Asia with nuclear weapons. You got Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, who is a terrible murderer, who murdered Khashoggi in cold blood and dismembered his body. You have Putin in Russia, who has been involved in political assassinations of his enemies. You got Xi in China, who's put 1 million Muslims into concentration camps. You cannot go around saying, you're a bad guy, we're going to assassinate you. And then you're going to have, if that happens, you're opening the door to international anarchy. That every government in the world will then be subjected to attacks and assassination.
Attacks?
What we have got to do, which Trump does not understand.
Oh, attacks. I thought he said attacks.
Is strengthen the State Department and our diplomatic capabilities, not just the military. What we have got to do is bring countries around the world together with our power and our wealth and say, you know what, let us sit down and work out our differences through debate and discussion at the UN, not through more and more war and the expenditures of trillions of dollars and the loss of God knows how many lives.
Senator Sanders, thank you. This does take me to Afghanistan and to America's longest war. And Senator Warren, you recently said, quote, we have one general after another in Afghanistan who comes in and says, we've just turned the corner. And then what happens? It's all the same. Someone new comes in and says, we've just turned the corner. You said so many say it, we're going in circles. We were on the ground in Afghanistan.
Well, that's what's happening in our politics right now.
And in Iraq in recent months. And the generals told us that the U.S. needs some U.S. presence on the ground.
Let's jump around here.
All they can describe is endless war. And I realize there are people...
I'm just kind of skipping these parts because, you know, my main issue is, you know, the economic matters. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that that person who is facing eviction sometime in the near future, these international war issues are the last things on that person's mind.
Debate stage have an interest in dealing with
happened. We pulled out and you saw what happened. You saw the
justification for that vote. You said it's the difference between tenure and judgment.
Here's what I saw. There's no possibility of uniting that country. No possibility at all making...
Look, he's getting angry, but it's like, get angry yourself. You were the vice president for 8 years, you know.
A whole country, but it is possible to see to it that you're not able to launch more attacks from the region on the United States of America. That's a small footprint that we needed. I argued for that in the beginning.
You mentioned Mayor Buttigieg, and I do want to take this to you next, Mayor. Given your finish in Iowa, you've come under increasing scrutiny, attacks from opponents on experience. We've heard that theme even right here tonight. You have said on the Iraq War, for example, I just don't believe there is any justification for that vote. You said it's the difference between tenure and judgment, that it's the judgment that matters, not the time in Washington. Vice President Biden, as you know, voted yes. As commander-in-chief,
wow.
Do you believe your judgment would be better than the vice president's?
I believe that I have the judgment to help us get through these situations where obviously the vice president made the wrong decision when it came to such an important moment.
Look at him, he's pissed.
In our foreign policy. And looking forward, we got to recognize just how much is going to be on the plate of the next president that is different in kind from what we have faced before.
Right, and Yang can take it all on.
It's not just about dealing with the aftermath of the war in Iraq, it's about preventing a war with Iran. And not only do we have to...
It's like we're going to these countries to, you know, quote-unquote liberate them, but we haven't even liberated ourselves from this disgustingly inhumane economic situation.
To undertake the military and counterterrorism activities that we've been doing throughout. The next president is going to have to restore the credibility of this country among our allies and among the international community. At a moment when we are facing fundamentally different challenges from asymmetric warfare to cybersecurity threats. President Trump's imagination of a national security strategy is a big wall and a moat full of alligators. It's a 17th century approach to keeping a place safe. What we have to do is be ready for the future. And that means insisting not only on shoring up our relationships, but defining a strategy to keep the American people safe from fundamentally new challenges.
Mr. Vice President, I'll let you respond to his argument on judgment.
I made a mistake. I said it 14 years ago. I trusted George Bush to keep his word. He said he was not going to go into Iraq. He said he was only using this to unite the United Nations, to insist we get inspectors in to see what Saddam was doing. When we got elected, the president turned to me with the entire security apparatus and said, Joe, I want you to organize getting 156,000 troops out of Iraq. I did that. The other thing I want to point out to you is that NATO is in fact going to crumble if we don't beat Trump. NATO is in real trouble. We need NATO for more reasons than just physical security. We need NATO to make sure that we do not allow Russia to continue to have its influence in Eastern Europe in ways that it had before. It wasn't just to stop the Soviet Union from coming into Europe. It was to make sure that we did not have a kleptocracy taking over that part of the world.
We have a kleptocracy right here. We give money to incompetent bureaucrats who don't help the people of the country. So, I mean, I don't know what your point is. Like, why don't we look at our own backyard?
In our behalf. I know how to deal with them. I know every one of these world leaders by their first names. They call me, I talk to them, and I believe I can get it done.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Mr. Steyer, I do want to bring you in.
You can get what done? Not understanding the future and technology and joblessness? Is that what you can do?
On this, because I noticed in the last 24 hours, you have an attack ad running here in New Hampshire with images of Mayor Buttigieg, and you say over those images an untested newcomer. But I wanted to ask you tonight on this readiness to be commander-in-chief. You share the stage with a veteran from Afghanistan, a vice president who was in the Situation Room. What makes you most qualified of all candidates on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
Nothing.
Well, let me say this. I agree with Pete Buttigieg that it's about judgment, not tenure. What we're hearing here is a very long dissertation.
Like, I can't even imagine, like, a President Tom Steyer. Like, it just doesn't sound right to me. I don't know.
About exactly how America should be the world's policeman. And what we've actually seen in the Middle East is that Barack Obama used diplomacy to get Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions in return for our releasing economic sanctions along with our partners around the world. So when we're talking about our role in the world and commander-in-chief, we have abandoned
we don't even have a role for, you know, the average person in this country to get through economic hard times. What the hell are we doing internationally? Ridiculous.
Diplomacy. We don't have a strategy and we don't have allies. And actually this view of the world that our response should be military is driven by our gigantic military complex and ignores the biggest problem that we face internationally.
And don't forget our media industrial complex that ignores people who, you know, takes away their voice and everything like that.
World, which is climate change. And that cannot be solved with guns and tanks and planes. It can only be solved.
Yeah, we're gonna like bomb the sky.
With diplomacy and allies and interaction with other countries. So in fact, what we are listening to right here is a discussion of 20 years of failed military action and how we should continue it and how we should continue spending $700 billion a year on defense when we spend $70 billion a year at the federal level on education. So let's talk about...
Right, the education that we get, that money that does not go directly into our pockets, and then when we're done, like, all the bureaucrats have become enriched, and all the people who dedicated their time and effort and energy into the education sometimes end up with nothing. Is that the education that you guys are talking about, or like what's going on here?
Judgment here. I did not say we're going to keep military forces there.
Mr. Vice President, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
That's not what I said. I was part of the reason putting that deal together with Iran. I was there. I was involved in that. I was also
Look, he's getting mad again.
Part of the deal putting together the Paris Climate Accord. I brought in the Chinese. I was part of that. I was part of every major initiative we've had relative to diplomacy. I have not argued for the placement of...
Look at all these corrupt politicians like getting pissed off when these privileged billionaires like want to call them out on something.
Major numbers of U.S. combat troops. I have said, along with the President of the United States, Barack Obama, as his partner, I have said we have to strengthen NATO to make it clear that we keep our commitments when we make them. Like we don't keep our commitments to the Kurds. We must keep our commitments when we make them. Otherwise, we have no...
Okay, how's this for making a commitment when you keep it? On average, university graduates make $1 million more than, you know, high school graduates. And then we have someone I talked to who experienced generational poverty, who had to eat out of garbage cans, which is terrible. It shouldn't be happening in this country, while getting the degree, got the degree, and the commitment for that middle-class job to get her out of poverty was not kept. What about keeping those commitments, you idiot?
Power whatsoever, and it's not about making sure we're policemen of the world. The only way not to become the policemen of the world is to have allies who will join us in dealing with failed states and terrorism, and that has to be done jointly by a whole lot of people. And
you mean failed states like all these states in our country that can't provide a decent economic situation for so many people who are suffering?
Doesn't require large number of U.S. troops, and I've never said that.
Okay, can I respond to that, David?
Senator Sanders,
can I respond to that?
Just say this, if I might. Like Joe and others, I also heard the arguments in terms of the war in Iraq from Bush, from Cheney, from John Bolton, from the whole administration. I listened very carefully, and I concluded that they were lying through their teeth. And I not only voted against that war,
there you go,
but I helped lead the opposition. And it saddens me so much, if you hear what I said, it's on YouTube, my fears about all the destabilization that would take place by the U.S. invading Iraq. It's sad to me that is what happened. But let me just pick up on a point that Tom made, which is absolutely right. Trump wants to build a wall around America. Problem is, if we are going to deal with issues like climate change, not only do we in America have to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry, we have to lead the entire world. This is not an American issue, it's a global issue. We got to bring China and Russia and Brazil and Pakistan and India and every major country on earth into the fight against climate change. And here is my dream. Maybe it's a radical dream, but maybe, just maybe, given the crisis of climate change, the world can understand that instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year collectively on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe
we can put it into a universal basic income and a freedom dividend.
We pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change.
So, David,
Senator Sanders.
Yeah, so let's care about climate change more than, again, that person who just lost all their paychecks and is about to be evicted.
Thank you. George, back to you.
We have much more debate coming up, but we have got to take a break. We'll be right back.
New Hampshire has one of the highest rates of deadly overdoses in the country. In some cases, police and paramedics tell us that they are saving the same lives again and again, sometimes more than once in a single day. It's a healthcare issue, but it's also so much more. Mayor Buttigieg,
Maybe it's because of depression over all the economic issues.
you have described yourself as a moderate, but one of your policies at least goes further than some on the stage with you are willing to go. You have called for the decriminalization of all drugs. Does that include heroin, meth, and cocaine, some of the drugs that have contributed to this crisis?
No, what I've called for is that incarceration should no longer be the response to drug possession.
With all due respect, Mayor Buttigieg, on your website it says that you called for decriminalization of all drugs.
Again, what I'm calling for is that we end the use of incarceration as a response. This does not mean that it will be lawful to produce or distribute those kinds of harmful drugs. But also, as we know from the opioid crisis, some of this has been driven by companies that were acting irresponsibly.
That's what Yang said.
With substances that were lawful. It's why in South Bend we sued those companies to hold them accountable. We've got to make sure that there is accountability for those who suppressed evidence about the addictiveness of those substances.
And no accountability for bureaucrats or politicians.
Even while we're also coming to recognize that these kinds of addiction are a medical issue, not a moral failure on the part of somebody battling that addiction. That's why medication-assisted treatment is so important. And those people who are being revived, and our own EMTs in my city have been so frustrated by the experience of reviving somebody, but then they have nowhere to go. Sometimes you get brought back with a dose of Narcan, but then your life depends on whether in the days that follow you make it until somebody can actually see you, because we have such a shortage of mental health and addiction providers in this country. We must act to change that and save lives when we do.
That's pretty bad.
I want to bring this question now to Mr. Yang. You've said
finally
you would decriminalize opioids, but you've also said that you would require all overdose patients to go to mandatory treatment centers for 3 days. Well, right now in New Hampshire, there aren't enough beds in treatment centers and across the country. How would you make sure treatment is available for all overdose patients, and what would you do to fill the gap in the meantime?
That's what we have to change, Monica. I've heard heartbreaking stories from families here in New Hampshire that have been destroyed, torn apart by the opiate epidemic. And you have to look at the companies that profited to the tune of tens of billions of dollars.
Right, and while we're at it, like, can we do something about these multi-level marketing companies that just prey on financially weak people to destroy their lives?
In profits of essentially blood money. As president, we will take back those profits and put them to work right here in New Hampshire so that if you are seeking treatment, you have resources to be able to pursue it. This is not a money problem fundamentally, this is a human problem, but money cannot be the obstacle. This is something that happened on the government's watch. The government allowed this opiate epidemic to spread throughout our communities, and we have to do everything in our power to actually make sure that if you're seeking treatment, you know you're not going to be sent to jail. We have safe injection and safe consumption sites for you. If you have a family member who's struggling, you can refer them and know that they're not going to have criminal penalties as a result.
That's a good idea.
There is so much about this that's endemic to what's happened throughout the country in terms of companies running amok, this hyper-corporate capitalism.
What about like bureaucrats running amok and not doing their jobs and getting paid for it?
If money's on one side in this country and people are on the other side, the money is winning. You can see it with the opiate epidemic. You can see it with the military-industrial complex, the fossil fuel companies. This is what we must change, and that's where I'll lead as president.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to take the question to you now. As a prosecutor, you embrace tough-on-crime policies, even with drug offenders.
Tough on.
You've also spoken many times about your father's own addiction issues, his own alcoholism, and his DUI arrests. If addiction is a disease, should people be arrested for it? And as a prosecutor, do you regret sending people with substance abuse issues to jail?
I led one of the most
Yeah, she's terrible.
successful drug courts in the country in Hennepin County. And I always would say and believed, and I think my record shows this, that we weren't a business. We didn't want to see repeat customers. And if you don't want to see repeat customers, the only answer is treatment. And maybe you're referring to some of the people who were dealing big time in drugs. Yes, I felt that we should prosecute those people. But when it comes to, and you asked Mr. Yang a question, and I think we owe it to the people of New Hampshire that had one of the biggest addiction rates in the country.
Well, at least she mentions Yang.
Death rates when it comes to opioids, to explain how we will pay for the treatment and the beds. I've been very clear about this. There's going to be a major settlement coming through, a federal settlement against all these opioid manufacturers. The evidence is overwhelming, including an email where one guy, a business guy, says to the other, they're eating them like Doritos. Just keep pumping them out. We will get a conservative estimate, $40 billion.
That's pretty evil.
And from that settlement, we can put a 2 cents per milligram tax on opioids that brings in another $40 billion. Then you can close the hedge fund loophole that brings in $18 billion. And just like every other policy I've proposed, and I think New Hampshire voters should care about this, I have showed how I'm going to pay for it. Because I think we have someone in the White House that has told over 15,000 lies. He makes all kinds of promises. The people of New Hampshire and the people of our country deserve better. I will get this done, and it is personal for me.
Good evening, candidates. New Hampshire is a battleground not just for presidential contenders, but also for top issues, and that includes gun policy. Senator Sanders, for many voters in this Democratic primary, your allure is about consistency. When it comes to progressive issues, you've been on the right side of them for a long time. One exception is gun rights. In the 90s,
gun wrongs.
When you were in Congress, you voted against background checks. You also voted against a waiting period for purchase of a firearm. Can you explain why you opposed these things that you now support?
I can, Adam, and let me also say that in 1988, I probably lost a race for Congress, and we only have one congressperson in the whole state.
That's how old he is. 1988. Year I was born. Year I was born. How much has changed since then?
Because in 1988, I said that we should ban the
It was my birthday.
sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. That was 30 years ago. Furthermore, I am very proud that today I have a D- voting record from the NRA. And under my administration, it will be the American people doing gun policy, not dictated by the NRA. But to answer your question,
The National... Well, I don't want to... Retard Association.
I come, like New Hampshire, from a very, very rural state. In Vermont, until last 2 years ago, we had virtually no gun control legislation at all, and I represented that perspective. The world has changed. In Vermont and in New Hampshire and all over this country, people are sickened by the mass shootings that we have seen and the gun violence that
Obviously.
we have seen. The world has changed and my views have changed. And my view is right now, we need universal background checks. We end the gun show loophole. We end the so-called straw man provision. We make certain that we end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. And we go further. We go further. But the bottom line is I will not be intimidated by the NRA. We're going to run the gun policy that the American people want.
Vice President Biden, you've taken a lot of heat in this primary on these debate stages and from voters here in New Hampshire for your past positions. You've essentially asked them to look at the totality of your record and give you the benefit of the doubt. Does Senator Sanders deserve that same benefit of the doubt on guns?
Well, look, here's the deal. The biggest mistake that Bernie made,
here's the deal,
that Senator Sanders made, he voted to give the gun manufacturers, the only major industry in America, a loophole that does not allow them to be sued for the carnage they are creating. First thing I'll do as president is work to get rid of that. It's going to be
That's pretty terrible.
Hard. Think of all the thousands and thousands of people who died. And I might add, Bernie, while you were representing your constituency, an awful lot of people, they're a gun state and they've come around. In fact, all those folks in California, New York, Pennsylvania, they were getting killed by the thousands during this same period. I come from a state that's a major gun-owning state. I introduced the first assault weapons ban. I, in fact, got it passed. I'm the only guy that beat the NRA twice. While I was pushing pushing the Brady background background checks. Bernie voted 5 times against it when he was in the House. So look, the other
That's pretty terrible.
thing is that when we have to be held accountable for the things we did. I'm the guy that set up drug courts. I set
It's always about Joe, isn't it?
them up. I wrote it into law, and it never got funded. And also on opioids, I'm the guy who's already begun to make a down payment. In the Cures Act, I put in $1 billion to fight opioid addiction. And lastly, my time is going to be up shortly. Here's the deal.
Yeah, your time up to be president.
Those chief executive officers of drug companies, they should not only be fined, they should go to jail.
Senator Warren, we'd like to go to you now.
Yeah.
Plans count for a lot. I want to ask you this question here, though. Laws can do so much. If you could change one thing about America's gun culture, what would it be?
Look, we have a gun violence problem in America. It is about the mass shootings that we hear about in our schools and that frighten us, about in theaters and in churches. It's also, though, about shootings that occur on sidewalks and in playgrounds, often in communities of color that are hit hardest. But there are no headlines over those. It's also about suicide and the increased lethality of suicide because of the availability of guns. It is also about the increased chances that it's usually a woman will die of domestic violence if she is with a violent man and a gun is in the home. We need to think of this problem not as one and done or 3 things and done. We need to think of it just like we did on auto safety. We just keep coming back. We treat it like the public health emergency that it is. But the question we should be asking ourselves is when America, across this country, including gun owners, agree in certain basic things, universal background checks, get assault weapons off the streets, why can we not even get a vote in the United States Senate? And the answer is 90%. Think about this. More than 90% of Americans agree on this. We can't get a vote in the United States Senate.
Because it's held hostage by a bunch of old dumb geezers?
Because it is the gun industry that continues to call the shots. Until we attack
Well, of course, they're the gun industry. They're going to shoot.
the corruption in Washington, the influence of money on campaigns and lobbying, we're not going to be able to meet our promises. And one more, until we agree that we are willing to roll back the filibuster, the gun industry is going to continue to have a veto, and we will never make the changes we make. We have to be willing to build a future that works, not for a gun industry, but that works for the rest of America and protects our children.
Got to be able to sue the gun industry.
Thank you.
Okay, why was Yang never asked a question?
Candidates, we're going to go back to David up there.
Adam, Monica, thank you, and thanks to WMUR tonight. I want to turn to the Supreme Court, the balance on the court, and the issues.
Yang had one of the best ideas on, the gun culture with his things of when, a kid picks it up, it has like a signature so the kid can't use it. They never asked Yang. And he also talked about what leads to these violent school shootings is when they don't have the resources for the kids to get through like their mental health stuff. He has a multifaceted approach. They never called on him.
Court right now. President Trump in just the last 24 hours saying we've appointed 191 federal judges, 2 Supreme Court justices, keeping his campaign promise to shift the court to the right with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. The Affordable Care Act is at the court, climate change is working its way to the court, and a major abortion case is on the docket this year. Vice President Biden, on the issue of abortion, in 2012, you said President Obama's 2 Supreme Court picks, of them, there was no litmus test. We picked people who had an open mind, did not come with an agenda. And you said before, we both believe that we should not apply narrow litmus tests to appointees to the Supreme Court.
But
let me just ask, would you do it differently as president, Mr. Vice President? Would there be a litmus test on abortion?
If you say the rest of what I said that we're going to not appoint anyone.
Does anybody really care about this? Please put this in the chat if you care about this Supreme Court stuff. Any section of the debate that really had nothing to do with your life and you didn't have an opinion on, please be free to comment, because we know we want solutions that we can see, feel, touch, and taste, and not things that these idiots can argue over, and it has nothing to do with our day-to-day. These things like climate change and the Supreme Court justices and Donald Trump, being, convicted of his things, they're kind of okay, you have like a stable economic situation, you can kind of climb up and you see a path forward financially and economically. For those of us who don't, it's really just wasting our time and energy, really. That's just the way I feel. I don't know about you.
Did not have a view that unenumerated rights existed in the Constitution. That's not a litmus test. But what I was talking.
And one of those key precedents is Roe v. Wade.
Okay.
we want them to. Is Justice Ginsburg wrong?
Well, if all we did was change the number of justices, then I agree with her that that could
against a man I revere, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He wanted to expand the court, but there were white.
Okay, so the court.
Look, what we saw Mitch McConnell do, not just in the Supreme Court with Merrick Garland, but across the board with federal judges, was refuse. We're sitting here talking about. We have a very diverse country. We have a very diverse party. The heart and soul of this party is diversity, black people, Latinos, AAPI people, Native Americans, and white people. But for goodness sakes, pull it together. We're talking about something different.
And why are you all white on the stage except Yang?
The question we have is, how are we getting that diverse group of people to the polls? What are we saying? Everybody on this
Well, you're not getting them up on the debate stage.
feels the same way about a woman's right to choose and economic justice. The question is, how do we beat Trump? How do we take down these Republicans? And the answer is, we've got to show we can take them down on growth, job creation, the economy. We send them packing, and then we get all of this, including beating the corporation.
Mr. Steyer, thank you. The night is still young. Many questions to come, and Lindsay Davis is next.
I want to turn now to criminal justice. Mayor Buttigieg, under your leadership as mayor, a black resident in South Bend, Indiana, was 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white resident.
That's crazy.
Now, that racial disparity is higher than the rest of the state. In fact, it's higher than the rest of the nation, and that disparity increased in South Bend after you took office. When talking about the problem on national terms, you've called it, quote, evidence of systemic racism.
That it's in his own state.
You were mayor for 8 years, so weren't you, in effect, the head of the system? And how do you
right.
explain that increase in black arrests under your leadership?
Well, the reality is, on my watch, drug arrests in South Bend were lower than the national average, and specifically to marijuana, lower than in Indiana. But there is no question that systemic racism has penetrated to every level of our system, and my city was not immune. I took a lot of heat for discussing systemic racism with my own police department, but we've got to confront.
And didn't you fire like a black police officer? So I don't get it.
The fact that there is no escaping how this is part of all of our policies. Earlier, we were talking about opioids, and thankfully,
Okay, you know what? I'm just going to jump around here too.
that our community adopted.
Same crime, study after study now shows that African Americans are more likely than whites to be detained, to be arrested, to be taken to trial, to be wrongfully convicted, and to receive harsher sentences. We need to rework our criminal justice system from the very
Our criminal and justice system.
front end on what we make illegal all the way through the system and how we help people come back into the community. But we cannot just say that criminal justice is the only time we want to talk about race specifically. We need to start having race-conscious laws. Housing, for example. I have a great housing plan to build more housing in America, but understand, it was the policy of the United States of America to discriminate against African Americans and people, any other people of color, for buying homes until 1965.
In fact, to allow businesses of them all.
You can't just repeal that and say, okay, now everything is even.
Okay.
It's not. We need race-conscious laws in education, in employment, in entrepreneurship to make this country a country of opportunity for everyone, no matter the color of their skin.
Elizabeth, with respect, you can't regulate away racism with
Right.
whole patchwork of laws that are race-specific. What we have to do is heed the writings of Martin Luther King, whose birthday we just celebrated. He said that capitalism forgets that life is social, and what he was championing was a guaranteed
For sure.
minimum income for all Americans of $1,000 a month or more. That would end up reshaping our economy in communities of color, make it so that black net worth is not 10% of white net worth in this country, which is the most important number of them all. We can't regulate that away through any other means except by putting money directly into the hands of African Americans and Latinos and people of color to allow businesses to actually flourish and grow in those communities.
Right, purchasing power. Purchasing power is power. You vote with your dollar. If you don't have money to spend on things, even things that are expensive, it's like you have your voice taken away. You don't count anymore. You're zeroed out.
The only way that will happen is if black and Latino consumers have buying power, and that is where we have to move as a country.
Senator Sanders, then Mr. Steyer.
Andrew, no, let me say this. I disagree with you, Andrew.
I disagree with you, Steyer. Have you ever been poor, you stupid son of a bitch?
I am the person on this stage who will say openly, I'm for reparations. Something wrong happened. I am for reparations to African Americans in this country.
Right, but that's going to be much, much harder to pass and to determine and to go through all of that. So we can start with this universal basic income first to at least have something tangible there.
And anyone who thinks that racism is a thing of the past and not an ongoing problem is not dealing with reality. In fact,
Andrew Yang never said that.
3 days ago, one of the leaders of Joe Biden's South Carolina campaign made racist remarks about someone associated with our campaign. And the Legislative Black Caucus went out en masse to stand up for that man and for our campaign. Joe, I'm asking you to come with me and the Legislative Black Caucus and disavow Dick Harpootlian and what he had to say. It was wrong.
What does this have to do with... Okay, if you're for reparations, what specific policy plan do you have to means test every single person who might have been affected by slavery? What are you going to propose? What are you going to put out there? How long is it going to take? How long have you been talking about it as one of your, key platforms? This is so stupid. These people are so dumb. They just know how to fight, but never how to solve any kind of issues.
And I'm asking you to join us, be on the right side.
I'm asking you to join me and join the support I have from the overwhelming number of the members of that Black Caucus. I have more support in South Carolina in the Black Caucus and the black community than anybody else. Double what you have or anybody else.
No, Andrew Yang has Dave Chappelle.
Wait a second. Bernie.
Well, that is quite right.
Let's not argue about polls. This isn't about Bernie. This isn't about polls. I'm not.
Great. It only took Tom Steyer to interrupt Yang and turn it back into a shit show. Like, this is what it is now.
This is not about polls. I'm not talking about polls. We have 9 members.
This can never work, this debate format, because it's always like going crazy and off the rails and insane and nuts and everything like that.
Of the
people and Latinos, because they could.
Okay.
About us.
You know what?
The black, white.
We moved to public funding of elections.
Okay.
Talked about whether it was right.
Put money directly into the hands of families, particularly single parents.
I love hearing him. Anyway, yeah, I can't do the entire debate. Tell me what you think, because I'll make a part 2 of this. Heck, I'm gonna get a long watch time, but I just needed to get my thoughts out there on most of this, because you really liked it the last time, and of course I don't expect you to watch maybe the whole thing through at once, but please tell me what you thought of all of this and what I had to offer, at least. And don't forget to, let me go back here. Yeah, let me go back here. And don't forget to share, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I really want to see, what you think of all of this. And I will see you on the next episode of Revolutionary Thinking. Thank you. Bye.